Thanks for joining us today. My name is Avan Guerra. I currently work for UTRGV Center for Sustainable Agricultural and Rural Advancement, also known as SARA. And I'm also a local owner operator of a small hay farm. I've been in the business for over 10 years. My grandfather started baling in the 60s here in the valley. My presentation today will include information to help you better understand the hay baling process. Let's begin. What is hay? Hay is the process of cutting, drying grasses and legumes. It is used when there is a shortage or drought of forages. Hay provides feed for large grazing animals raised as livestock, such as cattle, horses, goats, and sheep. Some advantages of baling hay are it can be used in times of drought or winter. Once the hay is baled, it requires less space for storage than silage, and it can be a profitable business if managed properly. And we know here in the valley, we typically have periods of drought. Typically, we always have a demand of hay year round. Some of the disadvantages of baling hay are that it requires a lot of time and extra labor. During the hay making process, 10 to 15% of the nutrients are lost. So it usually is used as a filler. Weather conditions must be hot and dry to properly bale, but that's usually not an issue in the area we live in. As you can see in the slide here, it requires several individuals to stack the hay on a trailer. For that reason, a lot of times people are sort of discouraged of getting into the business, but typically the hay bales, when it comes to square bales, provides the most profit margin. Not all hay is the same. Some types of hay produced in the RGV include improved Bermuda grasses, Sudan cross sorghum varieties, and some alfalfa. Alfalfa will be the variety with the most nutrients, and it is used to feed horses and show cattle. As you can see here in the slide, we have the top picture. It's an improved hybrid Bermuda grass. The middle picture on the slide here is going to be your Sudan grass, and the picture on the far bottom is going to be your alfalfa. Each of these types of grasses have sub-varieties. These are Tifton 85, NK37, Jigs Bermuda, and Coastal Bermuda. Producers of these varieties of hybrid grasses supply the local feed stores, equestrian operations, zoos, and private farm and ranch operations. Varieties of Sudan and hay grazer include red top cane, Sudan grass, sorghum, Sudan cross, and sweet sorghum crosses. This type of grass is usually grown for cattle producers, goat, and sheep operations. As you can see here, I'm baling some square bales for an operation that has goats. Typically, goats prefer the Sudan hay over Bermuda grasses, so I've got a market already set up for those particular bales. Just like other plants, these varieties are perennial or annual forages. Perennials are plants that last more than 2 years. Example would be Bermuda grass and alfalfa. Annuals are plants that complete the life cycle within one growing season. Examples would be hay grazer and Sudan crosses. This is something to consider if you're wanting to commit to a long-term crop. Site preparation is very important when establishing forages. Land that is planted in grass is recommended to be laser leveled prior to planting. This will help with irrigation and also will provide a better yield. This is a picture of machinery that is doing laser leveling. Keep in mind that laser leveling can be partially funded through the USDA with a qualifying grant. The land must be well managed and tilled in order to have a desirable yield. Typically, the land will be chiseled, plowed, and disked prior to planting. We have a tractor that is chiseling. We got another picture of a tractor that is plowing. Typically, prior to me planting my Sudan hay grazer, I'll run these two implements. Then I'll go back with a disc the field up, level it back up, and then I'll plant my hay grazer. The rate of seed may vary depending upon the conditions and equipment. Broadcasting and seed drill will usually allow 30 to 50 pounds per acre, whereas the single row planter will allow for 8 to 10 pounds per acre. And as I mentioned, it's all depending on your conditions. If you have plenty of moisture, you can typically, go the full 50 pounds if you're doing broadcasting or drilling it in. So keep that in mind that it all is going to revolve around moisture typically, and that would be one factor to decide how much to plant per acre. Here on this next slide, we see the types of planters that are used to plant hay grazer. On the first slide to your left, we have a drill planter, and as I mentioned, you can calibrate that drill to plant between 30 to 50 pounds per acre. The middle picture will show your conventional single row planter. In this particular planter, when I plant my hay grazer, I calibrate it to around 8 pounds per acre. And the picture to the far right, that is a broadcaster. And this implement, you can calibrate it all the way to 100 pounds per acre, but it's recommended 30 to 50 pounds as well. Typically, you want to plant about 5 to 10 bales of tops per acre. If you are sprigging, it is recommended 20 to 30 bushels per acre. When I say tops, typically that involves finding some good hybrid variety of grass that you want to plant in your field, and in that process requires for the individual to bale it for you green, and with those bales you'll go spread it in your field and disc it over, and that's the way that that process is done. The sprigging requires the implement that's here on the slide. It's a little bit more complex because they're actually pulling out the roots, and you need really specific implements for that process. But you can do either the through tops or through sprigging, and they'll both have the same results. Tops are the stem or the runner that is above the root and is usually 6 weeks old, and it can be between 18 and 24 inches long. Sprigs are typically 3 to 5 inches long and contain numerous nodes and roots. On this top picture here, this is a particular field that I get my tops from, and here it's freshly mowed grass, and what I'll do, I'll bale it green just the way you see it, and I'll take the green bales to the field, spread them out, and just disc it over. And as soon as I got the field disked, I'll apply the water. And typically in around 6 weeks, I'll start seeing the grass get established. And that's a process for when anyone refers to tops, that's what that entails. The bottom picture here, like I said, that is actually a sprig that was planted mechanically. And that requires, like I said, you to get your desired grass through an individual that has that equipment that pulls out the sprigs. So you can go both ways, but the most economical way would be by planting the tops, like I mentioned. Sprigging is about $125 to $200 per acre. Planting tops of Bermuda ranges between 70 to 100 per acre. Sudan hay grazer will typically range between 30 to 50 per acre. Sprigging is always going to be more expensive, like I said, because the individual that's going to do it has specialized equipment, and you would have to contract that person to come to your field and plant it. Planting tops, if you're in a budget like me, you typically get a hold of a producer that has a desired variety. You tell them that you would buy the tops or green bales, and the price can range from $7 to $10 per bale. If you need 10 bales per acre, if you want to go at that rate, you're still under $100. If you're doing Sudan or hay grazer, that price will vary depending on the hybrid of the seed you use, and other factors. But those are just some examples of estimated costs. Weed control. Once you plant your sprigs or your tops or your hay grazer, There's ways to control weeds. If you're doing a single row operation where you're planting with a single row planter, of course you can use mechanical. You can go with a cultivator and maintain it. Uh, if you're doing tops or sprigs, uh, your only option would be, of course, chemical or manual. You know, if you have invasive grasses that start creeping in, you can go in there and control them manually, or like I mentioned, use a herbicide, a selective herbicide that will not damage your Bermuda, but will kill those other grasses. Just like any other crop, these forage grasses are susceptible to insects that cause damage and loss of production. Common issues are the armyworm in Bermuda grass, sugarcane aphid in Sudan grass, and the alfalfa has the blister beetle. Bermuda grass has issues with the armyworm. It'll wipe out your grass from one day to the next, and that's been an ongoing problem the last couple of years because we haven't had a really cold winter. The productivity of your operation also includes a choice of irrigation methods. The most common practice of irrigation in the RGV is flood irrigation because it's the most economical. The sprinkler and pivot system requires a substantial amount of investment to include it in your production costs. As we can see here in the slide, flood irrigating some Sudan grass that I planted with my drill. So you can see there we had a very dry spring this past year. So I'm irrigating my Sudan. The middle slide there shows a pivot system, and that's becoming very popular with hay producers because you can irrigate and literally bale in 2 or 3 days because it doesn't flood the soil and the soil doesn't get saturated. It just applies the right amount of water to the grass. And the third picture on the very bottom, here I'm irrigating a field that I have of coastal. It was laser leveled, so I'm flood irrigating it. Here's a list of the equipment that is recommended when you get into the baling business. Purchasing new equipment required will come with a $150,000 price tag. If you're wanting to start with used equipment, you could find to spend about half the amount mentioned. In my experience, when I started baling, I started with all used equipment. You know, every year I would purchase something new once I started making a profit, and that's how I was able to manage my cost of the operation. On this slide here, we have a mower conditioner. This implement is the first to be in the field when starting the harvest process. It is designed to cut, crimp, and crush newly cut hay to promote faster and even drying. And here, as you can see, I'm cutting some Sudan grass. Without this particular machine that crimps, it would take me probably 10 to 15 days to dry. But because it's got the crimpers, it crushes the hay and I'm able to bale it in 3 to 5 days. Here on this next slide, we have a rake. It is used to collect hay into windrows for the baling process. It's a very handy tool because sometimes if you don't have a lot of yield, you can cut down your time of baling and going in circles with your baler by combining several windrows to make one. It's very beneficial to have a rake in your operation. The tedder is an implement that has forks that ruffles and aerates the hay, which speeds up the drying process. And typically the tedder, you're going to use it in the fall when the days are shorter and the days also are cooler. So that's an implement that's really good to have, and it'll improve the drying process. On this slide, we have a square baler. It's an implement that compresses a cut and rake crop into small square bales that are easy to handle, transport, and store. A desired weight for a square bale is between 50 to 60 pounds. A round baler is an implement that picks up hay from the ground and feeds it into the bale chamber where it is wrapped by hydraulic pressure from the belts, then released. Sizes of round bales vary from a 4x4 to a 6x6 and have a weight range of 400 pounds to 2,000 pounds. Hay baling in the RGV has become a common agricultural business. With the demand for high quality forages, the market will continue to be strong.